Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. This is Joe Saponari of SciMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigman of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. For the freshest content, a peek behind the scenes, and more candid conversation about running our businesses, dealing with clients, fixing tough technical issues, and everything else you love about Command Control Power, we invite you to join us on Patreon so you don't miss any of this great content. Go to commandcontrolpower.com and click support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the patron-only shows right in your favorite podcast app. One quick example, the concept of technical bankruptcy. And this is the idea that sometimes clients are perfectly happy to incur technical debt and just keep deferring this technical debt forever until the cost becomes infinite. And they have so much work that they need that we won't even help them because it's just too expensive on our side to try and put that time into helping them. So that was on a Patreon episode posted just last month. You can get that full episode and lots of other episodes. Visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. We hope to see you there, and thanks for listening. We are very pleased this week to be joined by a special guest, Ross Matsuda, Apple Systems Administrator from Ntiva. Ross, welcome to Command Control Power.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Excited to throw the ball around a little.
Yeah, excited to talk to you. We have a lot of shared interests, I think, in scripting and Addigy. We should mention right at the top your website, sudoade.com. Did I get the pronunciation right? I think you've got the lemonade references throughout the site.
Yeah, spot on. It's refreshments for Apple administrators.
Yeah, highly recommended. Great posts, really clear write-ups, and lots of great scripts that you've shared. I've benefited from a few of those. And listeners know I've tweaked some for our use here. Sudoade.com, sudoade.com. Is that also a play on your last name at all, or?
Oh, sadly, no. There is no Matsuda Macrotech anywhere.
Gotcha.
But now that you mention it, I should have caught that earlier.
And other listeners may know you more so by your screen name on Slack. So do you want to pronounce that? I don't dare try.
Oh, man. What even is that one? Sirius or Syrian Light?
Yeah, I think it's Sirius, right? With
Sirius.
an X at the beginning.
Yep. That'll do. That's an old BattleNet name from the early 90s that just has not left my side.
Nice. That's one data point in tracing the lineage and history of how you got into consulting. A lot of those screen names get carried on through the years. And that was the first way I recognized your name coming up in the Mac Admins Slack, which has been such a great resource, especially the Addigy channel there. And you've been very prolific in helping people there and also posting tips and things you've worked on. And now, again, sharing through sudoade. But before we get into the present stuff, do you want to just talk a little bit more about how you got into Apple consulting and when you got into Apple consulting?
For sure. Yeah. This has been a long and unusual trek. I've been working on Apple technology since I was a child. I was in the school systems, was always around. And then when I was in college, I majored in theatrical direction, primarily theater, even though these days I'm working in opera. And I had a minor in graphic design, which was all taught in the Apple ecosystem as well. And the one most important rule of any design program is the instructor does not care if your technology does not work. Is your work in on time? And so I had to take my familiarity with the Apple platform and figuring out how to solve my own problems, starting from there. And then after I moved to Chicago after I graduated, ended up working at a retail store, like so many others in the field. And so I spent 7 years as a genius. And then one of my buddies transferred to Apple Corporate. And the position that he had previously recommended that I take that on. So I flowed in there and then was working for a company called Forget Computers, mainly service desk, network administrational, things like that. Put in enough time, be strict enough with your documentation, and my skill set went from front of house to back of house. And that's when I started getting more into the administration side of things. And that's where I've been for the last 4 or 5 years.
Nice. How do you compare that to, I guess the more entry-level stuff is typically the end-user facing troubleshooting live with someone, as we say on the show, the Nana consulting. You're helping Nana with her email and whatnot. How do you compare the administration side to that front lines consulting, tech consulting side?
Oh, they cannot exist without each other. I cannot stress that enough. Because even when I was working at the Genius Bar, drop of wisdom just for everyone to enjoy until the end of time, the single best quote from my ears there was hearing someone explain to me that AOL is their Foxfire. That will follow me to the grave. But the thing is that it's just about scale, right? So like you start with the end user support and it's, oh yeah, that's the kind of weird thing. That was neat. You learn it, you figure it out, and then the next time it comes up, you can answer it faster. The next time one of your coworkers tells you about it, you're like, oh yeah, we did see that too. And then it just the scale builds because you take what you learn from working with a single user to identify what to automate. So how do you take that one learn, that one fix, and start speeding it up, start disseminating the knowledge through documentation? How do you take that from documentation to automation, whether it's user remediation through a self-service application or preventative things like maintenance and monitoring items. But it just really turns into the same verb, but built in a way that allows you to scale it up from a single consumer to multiple consumers to small business to enterprise, right? So you just follow the same thread all the way through.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about that as a verb, and I'm thinking about conjugating it in the singular second person versus like the plural if we had one wall. You can help an individual person and say, okay, click here, do this, or if maybe the first time you see the issue, it takes 2 hours to figure out what the issue is. And then you've got a few clicks to tell one person how to solve it. But then, like you said, the plural of that is the sort of automation to maybe even preemptively fix it or to empower the user to fix it with one click. So yeah, it's an interesting transition to make. I think not everybody is successful in going that direction. Some people prefer just dealing with end users. And of course, a lot of people, I think, a lot of our listeners can probably relate to wearing both hats and just more than two hats, doing all of the above. I know, Sam, you and I have been talking a lot about that recently. How do you look at yourself? Because I feel like we don't have as clear a transition story of going from the end user side of things or the help desk side to systems administration. The three of us co-hosts are business owners, so there's no clear one-way arrow leading there. It's just, I don't know, it seems like a tangled knot of interconnected arrows sometimes.
Who are these people, Joe, that like working with end users? Because I don't know anybody on our side that it's not me. As I get into my grumpy years, I definitely don't appreciate it as much. I don't have as much patience, but more power to the people that can, because we need more of those people in the technology field, because I'm falling out of that pretty quickly. I
wonder sometimes, do we need more people in that role? Like Apple would like you to think that you don't need more people in that role because the technology just works, as the saying goes. And more so as time goes on, the iPhone and iPad, it's largely true with those devices. I'm glad that those devices are as locked down as they are, because I think it really limits the kind of surface of issues that we deal with, messes that clients can get themselves into. There's less legacy in general being migrated forward. There's only one migration path that's Apple sanctioned for those kinds of devices. So you end up with less cruft building up over the years. And for all those reasons, I think those devices do tend to be much more, much easier for people. I'm really glad, since we don't have the same kinds of tools to run commands or remote access and things like that on iOS devices. And is that the direction the Mac is going to, where we might not need as many end user facing people dealing with issues, but most of this stuff will be handled on that macro level of dialing in a really good policy design for the client and then just deploying it, and things get fixed. Is that pie in the sky, or Ross, do you think that's we're heading somewhere in that direction with the Mac?
I think that I'd say, especially after hearing all of the requisite groaning about system settings, I think there's plenty of UI UX indications that we're going to start seeing Apple's operating system languages and visual vocabularies get closer and closer, even if they still remain distinct and separate from a usability standpoint. There's going to be more and more carryover to make it easier for Apple to try to sell iOS devices to Mac users and vice versa, right? So to grow both of those user spaces commercially. But as far as the necessity for device administration, especially in enterprise, I think that's always going to be there. It's lovely to think of a landscape in which there's significantly less reactive break fix going on with any given support desk and more, hey, the tech's doing exactly what it's designed to do. Let me teach you how to do that. Let me show you how we've set this up to make sure that you pull up the apps, they're already installed, they're possibly pre-configured, but here's how you actually do it. If all goes according to whatever plan may be in place, that the necessity of that customer-facing interaction will always remain, but it's just going to transition from more reactive problem solving to more sharing and training, which hopefully end up being more positive interactions than the things that really turn off a lot of support technicians, where it's the person calling in because something's upset. The pattern of glowing lights on their rectangle doesn't make them smile, and that's everybody's problem now. As that transitions to, I need to do this, how do I do it? The more common ask. We can hope.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something to look forward to there as things get easier and Sam can deal with fewer and fewer end users. I think everybody will benefit from that.
It's a dream.
Operating on that level, there comes a point where there is just a necessity to learn scripting, learn systems administration. And so like we've all standardized on Addigy. I know Sam also deals with Jamp. It's a very powerful tool. There's a lot you can do with it just built in, but it also is highly extensible. And there's a huge community of people that are extending the functionality of Addigy. One of the first things where you came up on my radar, Ross, was this GUI scripting with AppleScript post on your site, or maybe it was also before it was a post, maybe it was even in that Addigy channel on Slack. And it helped me with like what I saw as a really huge problem with managing updates for clients. We talk about that future, that utopian future of we're just managing things for large numbers of people all at once and everything's working as designed. Software updates don't even work as designed as of now, as far as I know. I don't like to just blame everything on an Apple bug, but there's a lot of weird behavior from software update. And it really started 2 OS versions ago when the command line tool either broke or was deprecated. We needed ways of managing software updates as basic a function as that. And what I found, of course, was that Addigy's solution was to work around the fact that the software update command line tool was broken, so they couldn't actually deploy updates silently in the background. They instead had to prompt users to update. Of course, the issue was that Apple's built-in software update panel and system preferences, now system settings, was the same place where they would also push out major OS upgrades. And they have great marketing. So not only are clients seeing all the marketing through emails and social media and things like that, but of course they're getting pop-ups on their system about how great the new OS is on day 1 or day 0, and they should just upgrade. And then they follow our lead to do a software update, which we're recommending going from whatever it is, 12.6.2 to 12.6.3. And when they get there, following our prompts, they then see this branding for upgrading to Ventura and how great it's going to be. And they click the most obvious button, which I don't know if it says upgrade or install now or whatever it is. So they got tricked into doing that. So the simple solution that I thought was an absolutely brilliant and elegant use of these tools, including Addigy and AppleScript and GUI scripting, was this workflow you designed to literally open the software update panel, wait for it to load, because maybe it has to check for updates and recheck or whatever it's doing. And if it sees the button, more info, not the more info button about Ventura in this case, but the more info button about other updates being available, it clicks it using GUI scripting from AppleScript, an amazing solution. So they only briefly see this upgrade now button for Ventura. They see this panel we want them to see with these updates, Monterey 12.6.3 and Safari update and whatever else is there for their OS version. And all they have to do is click install now. You'd think that would be pretty straightforward for people. They still have trouble with it, but it gets them a lot closer to where you want them to be. So thanks for your efforts on doing that. How hard was that to set up?
I'm really glad you appreciate it, and boy, did you nail that on the head. The horse is dead. The horse has been beaten with enough sets of jumper cables that we've covered the bases. Software update is painful. Designing that was really rocky because I knew we had to do something. And after the software update binary went sideways on us, the first thing I used was Nudge, right? It's really powerful, really wonderful open source project that gives you much more designable, like very interactive pop-up notifications for your users. That just says like, hey, there's a security update available. You can throw screenshots in there. I used to include a screenshot that showed a thumbnail of the software update preference pane with an enormous X through the upgrade.
But let me guess, they just kept clicking the button in the screenshot instead.
Spoiler alert. So what I ended up doing was leveraging a tool that I was actually warned against using. Other admins that I've worked with over the years have told me that GUI scripting is an absolute nightmare. Surprise, they're not wrong. But it is very effective at what it does, right? Because it does allow you to iterate through pretty much any UI elements in the OS and get the accessibility name for it. And then with the proper PPPC in place, act upon it. And so in order to, instead of relying on users to read the nudge notification, That's even step one. Most of them would just see it and then contact the support desk because it's scary. They've never seen it before. They call us. And so they'd have to read it, then act on it, then act on the software update window using the knowledge that they gained from the original. The interesting part about doing this was that all of my work is in Bash and Z shell. All of my Objective-C that I learned back in the day is completely lost. It's like high school Spanish at this point. There's little traces, but not very much usable. And so I had to figure out AppleScript a little bit, but I was able to set it up. The piece of information that I gleaned from these other admins who've done similar things in the past was that you need to have an if statement set up that acts differently depending on the operating system, right? Because every time Apple refreshes the OS, the exact button number or name or label for each one of these items might change. And it did. And so this thing iterates through Big Sur, Monterey, and Ventura to see what you're running, and then acts appropriately to try to click what it's supposed to. There's a fun piece of trivia that's not going to matter until this autumn. But the more info button in Ventura is fascinating because it exists. You can click on it, but it doesn't have an accessibility tag.
Oh, no.
Every single beta that's come out, I run the same scripts to scrape everything that's in there. But in Ventura, that's an invisible button. I do not understand how it even works. And so I'm going to obviously refactor all of this like crazy next October. But for the time being, it gets a job done. And to be honest, I went a step further, which was like maybe a little much. But there's a new version of the script out that not only shows the users the available updates, it'll hold if you're on Apple Silicon and it's not plugged in, so that it doesn't cancel out and fail out there. It'll actually click through the install button to actually start the download, including detecting if the EULA appears and then accepting that. So obviously, as soon as you need to deal with all those extra clicks, you just make sure that your clients who are using the software have signed off that, like, we acknowledge that we don't own any of our technology and that Ntiva can click this button on our behalf.
Yeah, it reminds me of the old update command line where it was dash accept agreement or something, whatever it was. It's like, is that legal? What's the difference? What's the point? I wrote that into a script once. Am I liable for everything that happens to everybody's computer from now on?
Pretty much, Joe. You are.
It's a weird situation, like, to handle that use case. But Joe, that's amazing. Yeah.
Joe, are you upset that Ross only went as far back as Big Sur and didn't include your operating system in there?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, Ross mentioned Nudge. There's no current release of Nudge for Catalina, and obviously those have to be handled as a special case. I am running Monterey, and I do have a Monterey virtual machine for testing, and I'm planning to build out a Ventura one because I need to have a good test system there. But that sounds pretty extensive, Ross, that you've built in all those different edge cases about whether the button pops up. What about the prompt for the admin credentials? Did you mention that one?
For admin creds, I leave that one well enough alone. And that should be the last or only thing that's required of the user. In Monterey and earlier, that's the last thing required of the user. On Intel, that's the last thing required of the user. And then in Apple Silicon, it's volume ownership.
Okay.
But whatever that prompt is, that's the only thing that I couldn't fully automate. And to be fair, I could, but it would be of limited value because the amount of user interaction would remain the same because we'd still need to capture the password from the user. So they'd get a pop-up one way or the other. I figured I'd leave that one to the native Apple, even though sometimes it asks for an admin when it really just wants a volume owner.
Yeah, that's tricky enough too, because people then, of course, need to figure out which password that it's asking for, which they have a hard enough time doing sometimes about, now, what password is this? Well, it's the Mac login password. What does that mean? The computer password. Is that my admin password? Yes. Okay, so it's confusing enough, but it sounds like you've handled as much as possible there, and I'll have to update my script because that's fantastic. And I actually have this connected to Nudge, so I don't know if that's the way, I forget if that was your intention there, was combining this with Nudge, but the idea is like Nudge can still pop up and nudge the user and keep nudging the user to the point of bugging the user to update. And then that button to click, and I'm forgetting offhand what it is by default, update now or something like that in Nudge, that default button there just runs this AppleScript, which is, for listeners, it's an app that, is compiled and signed, which is important. You have to learn how to do that if you don't already know how to do that. I had to learn that and then deploy that to the device. So it's like an AppleScript compiled app that sits on the user's Mac somewhere behind the scenes. They never should open it or even go looking for it. But that's the app that Nudge opens when you click the button, which then handles the rest. It opens software update. So rather than the default behavior of Nudge to just open the software update panel, leaving the user to try to remember that they have to click more info under other updates and blah, blah, blah. It does that for the user. So it does get them that much closer to the solution. And I found that once I was automating this, just anecdotally, it really helped. We went from having clients that where updates just never got done and every machine was perpetually out of date to having much higher compliance with the software updates required.
Yeah, it's really good to hear. And yeah, Nudge was always our go-to. I'd like to stay an optimist and believe that one day we will be able to abandon Nudge and just stick with the MDM software update framework.
Yeah.
Because now that we can program deferrals, and now that we can use the install later argument for the MDM command for the updates, like these are all really powerful features that are going to hopefully make this lower friction for users. But until that is working on pretty much like 100% of devices, yeah.
One issue that we have that you may not have, Ross, in your situation where you're working for managing like presumably much larger clients than most of my clients, is that a lot of the machines that are enrolled in MDM are just user enrolled. And by default, we don't have the ability to manage software updates unless they restart to recovery and we walk them through allowing that, basically. And correct me if I'm wrong, if MDM is enrolled using automated device enrollment, then that's handled automatically. Is that the only situation where like MDM updates, software updates are allowed by default?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. And I think you nailed it on the head. Back in the day right when Apple Silicon was coming out, a lot of our clients still hadn't gone through the steps to create an ABM account. And it's been an enormous point of friction with a lot of companies that we work with, which is really a shame because honest to goodness, it's about 5 minutes of work total over the course of 3 days. But there's reticence, there's hesitation there. But yeah, if your Apple Silicon devices specifically aren't in via ADE, you've got to kick that reduced security so that you can leverage this feature. Now, we had a lot of our clients doing that and getting in the practice of doing that because of the alert that shows up upon MDM enrollment for an Apple Silicon device that's enrolled via UAMDM or manual supervision. That says like, oh, if you want to manage these things, you have to do this. And it's got the little yellow triangle to alert people. They go in there and do it. And that was also necessary because just as Apple Silicon was getting adopted, we were still dealing with a lot of apps with kernel extensions. So we were telling folks, just click all the boxes. This is going to matter someday. It'll be best to just have it done.
Right.
We still have a mix though. So it'll probably be a good long time before we see the majority of our Macs being able to use that framework.
And originally, I guess the issue with MDM software updates was also that you'd have these Ventura breakthrough upgrades. Was that happening because MDM updates were trying to like deploy, again, a 12.6.3, say, update, and for some reason instead it would push out like a 13.0, or was that because the users would stumble into that same problem of just like agreeing to some update that we didn't really want them to do?
The answer is both.
Yeah.
We got a whole lot of both. We got users clicking on the big shiny button because it had a picture next to it. But to be honest, more often than not, we were getting people who were just baffled that the upgrade even occurred. And that was a two-pronged thing, right? When 13.0 first launched, it was published in the software update catalog as a minor update. And so it got picked up by a lot of machines and it snuck past some of those initial blocks and deferrals. And then later on, there was a separate update specific to the MDM software update framework that was causing accidental updates to go through. Oftentimes, a user would run the update for Safari, just Safari, be prompted to reboot. They'd restart and they'd be in Ventura. And that has just been resolved in 12.6.3. And so if you're an organization that is leveraging the MDM software update framework, please get your Monterey Macs on 12.6.3 to try to prevent those accidental upgrades.
Yeah, but it's such a catch-22, right? Because if you're not on 12.6.3 already, this is a client-side bug somehow. I don't understand like really how this bug even came out and like why it's still lingering. But I know like prior to 12.6.1, we knew this was an issue, so hurry up and patch and all that. But then it was maybe still an issue on 12.6.1 and 2. But like, why couldn't they fix it somehow on the for update server side or catalog side? So I don't really quite understand, because you can't use MDM software updates to patch a machine reliably to 12.6.3 unless I'm misunderstanding something, without the risk that they just get Ventura, they get more than they bargained for. Or is that edge case not an issue anymore for some reason?
I don't have numbers for this. I wish I did, but I sadly don't. But yeah, you've nailed it on the head, which is this unusual paradigm of, hey, we really want to support day one upgrades. Us in enterprise, we sometimes run into problems like our security vendors don't have their stuff ready in time. Font managers sometimes aren't ready in time. There's stuff that's really business critical that's going to hold some offices from being able to jump on there the first day that the OS launches. And then they give us all these wonderful tools to defer that or to block that. And then those tools stop working and people start breaking through. Or the other side of the question that we've been dealing with now is we have users who are excited to update, run the upgrade to Ventura. We drop the blockers, the deferrals all expired, all of that. They run the full installer, and then 25% of the way through, the thing just crashes with an unknown error.
Wow.
And so we've got this very bizarre situation where when we didn't want it, people were getting it. Now that we want it, we can't get it. It's a challenge.
Yeah, and
it's a challenge.
It's a challenge, and it's particularly frustrating just thinking this is really such a basic thing just to be able to decide as the admin whether we want someone on this version or that version, and also as a user to be empowered to make those decisions and reliably have it work. To have this be broken is just so frustrating, like the amount of time that we spend working around it or troubleshooting it. And then I had the other day realized I had blocked or I deferred minor updates for a certain amount of time to avoid clients getting a quote unquote minor upgrade of Ventura, going from Big Sur or Monterey all the way to Ventura. So I guess that was the recommendation, was to defer minor updates to avoid that accidental Ventura upgrade. But of course, then it also blocks the minor updates that you want. And you really want to go to 12.6.3 or 12.6.2 at the time. And you're only seeing 12.6 or 12.6.1. And it's like, why is that? And it's not working reliably. And then, oh, that's why I've deferred my own minor updates. And again, how do you defer that, release those minor updates while still avoiding the bug of an accidental upgrade to Ventura? And maybe you've got, and then maybe you're getting the wrong version of Ventura because you've got a different minor update deferral window that's now causing you to see only 13.0 and not 13.1. Or it's so frustrating. It's like my head, I just can't wrap my head around it sometimes. And then at that point, I'm just like, all right, just, whatever versions you're on, I don't really care anymore.
You've just thrown up your hands, Joe, and
right.
You're done with it.
Yeah, it's annoying because we say to clients, we manage your software updates, and then just the amount of time we spend banging our heads against it and just eventually not having it not be managed it's unfortunate.
I mean, I've the last couple articles that I've written, and I've got one more coming up in another week or so, is all just about this subject, right? So I put out a couple ones on facts and extension attributes you can use to get devices to read your device state for software update, including the one that I think I needed to build the longest but waited for some reason, which was trying to find a write a fact so that you can see a device, figure out what it thinks its software update status is, whether
right.
It thinks an update's available or not, and then compare that to an updated array that you put in of the current builds of all the operating systems, and compare that and say, okay, these 12 machines, they're all reporting something bad. Here's the script to kickstart it, make it start talking again. But I have a feeling that there's a couple tools at our disposal, like things like that you can use for automated remediation. I think one of the big ones that we should always keep up our sleeve is the full installers in self-service. When it comes right down to it, if it is business critical, block and defer everything that you can, and then make sure that your full installers, one-click installers that you make available to your users, punches through your blocker. Right, to make sure it gets, for those, I always make sure that the application package gets staged somewhere non-standard so pblock doesn't catch it. And yeah, if you train the culture enough, if you release public-facing documentation that's engaging, that's easy to read and available to your users, you can build an infrastructure behaviorally for them that can get around some of these limitations. It takes some time, but it's a way to approach it.
Yeah, the last two posts have been great. I did spend some time implementing the scripts and custom facts and things from the software updates part 1 and part 2. I'm very much looking forward to part 3. Even just developing some of the very basic custom facts is really useful. Being able to know if the machine is on the latest macOS version, or if it's on the latest version of whatever it's on. If it's on Monterey, knowing that it's on Monterey 12.6.3 as of now. Like you said, you have to manually specify that, I'm embedding in the script that the current version of Monterey is 12.6.3 because you can't trust software update to know what the current version is, and you need to compare what it thinks. Okay, I'm running 12.6 and I'm not seeing any updates. You're not up to date. You're not seeing 12.6.3. So then you can run like a remediation to kickstart the software update process. Basically, that has evolved over time too, removing the receipts or whatever and different things to do there to get that to actually find the right updates on that machine. To know that it's in that state and to automatically remediate that. And then where this is all leading me is thinking about if there's some kind of dashboard that we can show to the user. I would love to have this self-service option that would be on the scripts page, let's say, and they would click on it. It would be like, check my machine, say something more friendly, use your branding in there, or say something about, am I in compliance, or a self-check or something like that. And so these are the things I care about, basically, right? Is it up to date? So that all those custom facts could come in handy. It would be a green check mark if you're on a supported OS. And I would consider a supported OS 11.7.3, 12.6.3, or 13.2 as of now. So if the version matches that, you got a green check mark there. If it's a yellow caution symbol, then that means there's updates, and it would say there are 2 updates, and then it would list them. And those are built into your custom scripts as far as in these latest posts here. And listeners can go and get those and play with that, and reporting that to the user is a whole different exercise. And that's what I'm thinking through now. It would list the updates that are available. Or it would have a red X when it would say, you are on an unsupported Mac OS version that's no longer receiving security updates or whatever. And then it would have a link to the full installer, upgrade now or whatever, to get to the latest or whichever version you want them to have. It would do things like check the backups if you want it to, Time Machine status, Backblaze status, whatever. And then it would say like the last malware check ran at this time and found 0 malware. Have you thought about doing anything like that, Ross, or have you played with those ideas yet?
We already have that, sort of.
Uh-huh.
Big asterisk on the sort of.
Yeah.
So back in the day when my organization was still Forget Computers, we were acquired by Ntiva, right? So Ntiva, large, really cool MSP, wanted to start entering the Apple space instead of starting their own team from scratch. They had a great working relationship with our original founder, Ben Greiner. They all got to talking. We're all under the same umbrella now. It's wonderful. While we were still Forget Computers, we had a product called Dashboard. And what it is a read-only portal that would tie into our original JSSs for our clients, pull that data out, and we would just target very specific pieces of information, right? Local IP, MAC address, backup status, hard drive full, CPU usage percentage, RAM usage. Some of those things were averaged out over the last 7 days of reports, things like that. But the point was to cut through all the cruft, because any MDM that you're going to be using is going to be collecting a ton of data, which is just what it's there for. But most end users are not going to be able to engage with that. You put too much in front of them. You put too much in front of an admin, they're going to ignore it. It's not useful. Right. So we just showed them what they needed. And we were able to get this in the hands of our clients, right? So that a primary contact or a couple important people in an organization can pop in, see what they need to about their fleet, generate some CSV reports if they want to go into the weeds, and there you go. We eventually rebranded that as something called VisionBot, and that's what it's currently called now. And our integrations have expanded, right? So now, obviously, we're an Addigy house. So it's mostly connected to our Addigies. We worked with our developer, and he did some spectacular work. But now we're able to hook into Jamf Cloud, we're able to hook into Addigy, we're able to hook into Kaseya, and it just pulls up all that at-a-glance information so that our technicians, right, on the support desk, they can pull it up and quickly navigate to advice. They have a one-button click to get into Go Live in Addigy to do immediate device support straight from VisionBot. We get that in the hands of our client primary contacts. They can keep track of their fleet and let us know if they have questions or see something funny. The only people who usually don't get access to that is the end users themselves. That is the last step about having a user being able to trigger a great one-pager that just says, here's exactly what's going on your machine. What do you want to do about it? That we don't have yet. But the other things, we've got going pretty good. To be honest, the hardest part on my end is that every time we're a pretty large MSP, and so we work with clients in a ton of different industries. And every time we brought someone on who was using a different backup manager, using a different endpoint protection solution, it was my job to go into the client and see how much information I could pull for JSON files and plain text files, anything that was stored locally on the device. So I could always tell the version number of the backup software, when its last backup was, how to verify that the endpoint software is not just installed, but reporting. And so I've had to pull this apart for 7 or 8 different vendors and keep feeding that data into VisionBot to make sure that no matter what backup solution that you're using, it's going to show up in our dashboard. Same thing for endpoint protection. So we've got that on a couple levels. I think building that for an end user would certainly be doable. Something tells me Dep Notify could probably be leveraged for that in a really neat way. But I have not built something for that express purpose of giving users that really premium, like white glove, what's my exact device status? Show me the goodness.
Yeah.
That
and
could be
something
fun.
Customizable too, so that we can, uptime would be a good one to include. If it's under 7 days, it shows up in green. And if it's over 14 days, it's in red, and he has a button to restart or something like that. Just little things that we could customize that are things that we pay attention to. But I hear you about also having to continue to modify those scripts and things to accommodate changes in software. This reminds me of Watchman monitoring for so many years, adding features like that, but also having to stay up to date with new versions of things that come out and do the reporting a little bit differently or whatever. So VisionBot, is that for sale? That's my next question.
This is hilarious, but I'm going to have to check.
I would love to know, because that sounds like a great white label service for consultants out there to be able to offer to their clients. You get this dashboard where you can see the status of all your Macs.
In the past, we have. And so I know that even today, if I log into the dashboard of VisionBot, which used to be dashboard, it never gets old. I've got a couple names in there of organizations that I haven't talked to in a while that are using this out in the wild on their own. So I'm pretty sure that's still a doable thing. I would just need to verify before I make any promises.
Nice. Yeah, we'll talk offline about that. But
Joe has requests.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, I'm glad I didn't spend too much time trying to develop this on my own. But it just occurs to me, a lot of this stuff could be so much better for end users and for managing these bigger companies, and even small businesses or very small businesses. Everybody would benefit from this. And a lot of times the information is there, like you're saying, but it's just so dense, and there's so many things we don't need to see or that are presented in a way that's hard to understand. And we can go a lot farther. If a user, they're having problems, maybe before they send us an email, I need help, with no detail. If they were able to click a button that would say, check my system, and then it would report back and say, hey, it looks like it's been a while since you've restarted, so I'd recommend doing that first. And then also note that you need this software update, so try that, and then see if your issue isn't resolved, then let us know. That's what I'm doing manually. Like, I'm looking at the person's name in the email, and then I'm looking at their system, either in Addigy or Watchman monitoring, and I'm doing that assessment. And that could be done by a computer. If the uptime is high and the updates are out of date or woefully out of date, or there's malware, or whatever the status is that could be easily assessed, it could save me a lot of time, save the user some time as well, and just present that information really simply. The solution built right in. It just seems that it's been a long time of computers where we haven't had that. People don't know where to look for this information. They don't know what to care about, and it's not rocket science. That's my dream for this industry, is to have better communications with end users and simpler ways of presenting information, systems just doing the right thing rather than having somebody read a wall of text to try to understand what they're supposed to be doing.
Hats off. You're proselytizing on subjects that I'm deeply invested in. That's the cult of automation, which is, I cannot stress enough how important it is. And all of that, however, needs to be formed. So you can be the best script, you can be the best coder on the block, but if you're not designing what you build and how you automate in a human-centric way, in an empathetic way, then it's still going to be of limited utility to your users. And so designing, that's something we can all learn from Apple, right? It's the stuff that they do design when it's coming from a place of understanding the emotional experience of the user, when you're informing your automation decisions, when you're informing the documentation you build and the workflows that you build from that standpoint of what's the person experiencing, what are they feeling at time of need? Like, when that occurs, what are they going to see? What are they going to respond to? Putting together the customer-facing documentation that you need, the internal-facing documentation, so that your techs can all be on the same page, have maybe some unified language or documents they can share. As long as the technology itself is built in a way that is empathetic at its core, you're going to be able to craft some really powerful experiences. And It'll still feel neat. There's still that little emotional reward when you're like, hey, I fixed that myself. I didn't need to call anyone. I'm pretty great. And so being able to give that to users builds your brand, right? Lowers your support desk traffic, and increases retention. Like, everybody wins. But it's sometimes hard to remember and to prioritize the emotional and the human element in this field, right? Because we get so excited about the tech, but there's a lot of value to it.
Yeah, definitely need to keep the user in mind. And I think it makes it easier to do that, having had the experience in the field, talking to endless users, as you did at the Apple Store, as I do and continue to do, and Jerry and Sam both do on a daily basis. Having that experience, I often think about how that expertise in dealing with users and just seeing what their frustrations are could be leveraged in some other field or tangential field like UI design or something like that, where we see a lot of things that bother people. We see people bumping into issues that they can't understand, or just the things that they tend to just ignore that pop up. Maybe it's the way it pops up, or when it pops up, or how it's worded, or how it looks, or whatever the issues are. And you can, like you said, empathize with those people and see where they're coming from. And hey, this thing pops up when I open Word. It's like, when I open Word is when I want to use Word, not when I want to do some tech tasks on my system, like maintenance and things like that. I'm opening Word because I want to use it. How about don't check for updates then? What if the system could pop up a message when it sees there's a lunch scheduled on my calendar, or like when it sees the last appointment on my calendar is ending, or just close to the end of a typical workday, close to 5 p.m. That's when it should pop up and say, hey, are you finishing up soon? Now might be a good time to leave your computer open and just click this button when you're ready, and we'll do the rest. And it wouldn't say all that necessarily, but that's essentially what it would achieve. That would be a way of getting more buy-in from users to actually do the things you need them to do if you ask them nicely and at the right time and make it easy. And also, tip for Apple, make software updates work, and then people will do them. Yeah, these are the goals. It's amazing that the industry, as much as it's been maturing on a technical level of our own software, the user interface and what we need from the user has not really matured very much in the last 10 or 20 years that I've been doing this. So a lot of room there, and a lot of room for systems administrators to do better, and therefore lead to more success in the companies that we work for and the clients that we support. And then everybody's in alignment there and everybody can benefit. Yeah, looking forward to the next post on sudoade, Ross, because I think that's going to continue on this updates train. It sounds, and I know there's going to be a lot of value there. So sudoade.com. And anything else you want to leave listeners with as we wrap up here, Ross?
That's the most of it. Enjoy your technology. Don't forget. It's for all the frustrations we run into, for all the weirdness that we deal with on a day basis, supporting devices and supporting users. It's really fun every now and then to take a step back and be like, man, this could have taken humanity to the moon and back 68,000 times compared to what we had back then. That little bit of joy is worth it. We all need it when we can.
On that note, thanks again, Ross Matsuda, for joining us on Command Control Power, and look forward to more of your posts at sudoade.com, and we'll see you in the Addigy channel on Mac Admin Slack. Thanks again, Ross.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of Apple expertise right now. Right now. My Mac is slow. Have you tried restarting? Well, the fans won't blow. Have you tried restarting? But my data is gone. Have you tried restarting? I dropped it